first, what you have to understand is under the CARES Act, and I've not delved into line by line of the CARES Act, but have gotten the general idea of it and what it does. And what the CARES Act has done is sent this money to the states for the purpose of addressing the coronavirus and helping the states do that. Well, because the state of Mississippi does not have a city that is more than 500,000, who controls that money in the state of Mississippi defers to the state, because there's language in the CARES Act that said if there's cities that are 500,000 or more, that money goes directly to them. Well, Mississippi doesn't have that. So then what has happened is you're seeing a democracy in action, where the executive branch versus the legislative branch is taking place. And that is because constitutionally, and this has been the case since I've been in the legislature, and I think anybody that is familiar with this would say this, that the legislature has the authority to appropriate dollars. And in this case, that's $1.25 billion that has come to the state to address this. Well, the governor has been operating under the Mississippi Emergency Act, and I've talked about that personally on my Facebook videos, and that act was passed somewhere around 40 years ago, but that's the act that is used by governors when there's an emergency declaration, okay? And understand this, that the legislature gave that authority to the governor. And so in times of emergency crises or whatever, that law gets triggered, okay? Within that law is a provision that the governor's relying on that says that any funds that come from the federal government gets to be used in an emergency situation. Well, the legislature obviously does not see it that way, because it's been our constitutional duty to appropriate that. And let me say this, that statute that is being relied upon, I personally have reviewed it, and in my interpretation, while it does give the governor certain powers, it doesn't specifically mention appropriation. So what, in my opinion, what you're seeing and what's playing out is that you're seeing the executive branch, who's been operating under this emergency powers, which I can't argue with that. That's why you have an executive branch, or that's part of their duties, versus the legislature's duty to appropriate the money. Now, at the end of the day, I've always voted, and it's always been my position that the legislature has the appropriating authority of dollars. What has complicated this fact is that this legislation, this statute passed by the legislature decades ago, is leaving open that interpretation. Now, it does not surprise me that any governor in that position would take this position, because you know what they say about power. And the governor, in his orders to this point, has cited the Mississippi Emergency Act. So to that degree, it's not like he's out on a limb with some law coming out of the woodwork. So as I've said before, maybe the legislature needs to look at why not do that in the first place, or look at what we're doing, because, and I'm happy to go down this road, what we've seen in Congress over the decades is they give away all their authority, and then they go and complain that the president in that case is doing different things, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And maybe the legislative branch should not be doing that, or certainly should think twice about what they're doing or what the ramifications can be. So the rush is that nobody disputes that the intent of the CARES Act was to get to the people and to be done quickly. And while I'm not 100% familiar with the specific deadlines, but there's deadlines in there that says has to be done by the end of the year and all that. Also, for the state of Mississippi's budget, the fiscal year starts July 1st. So if the legislature's to do something, then it needs to be done now, okay? And then the governor, who by his own terms have been in consultation with the White House, has the understanding that that needs to be done right away. And so that's why you're seeing this play out right now. And then the legislature, we've got to set the budget by June 30th so that we know so that the agencies in the state can function. So that's why you're seeing this rush on that. This is the position that I've said from day one, that's today when this started, is that it's about the citizens and Mississippians who are unemployed, who are on the front lines, who are sick, in cases dying, and to have a prolonged fight with politicians up there is not beneficial to them, because at the end of the day, this money is to address the coronavirus. And if we in the legislature and honestly in the state government lose sight of that, then we're not doing our job. And this should be about the citizens who are facing this and trying to deal with things that honestly we're not having to deal with, that is us legislators. So we can't lose sight of that. I do think that we will be back in session for a day or something within the next couple days, and to address it. What that's going to look like, I can't say at this moment. But back to my original point is, I think if it truly is, which I think it is, what you're seeing, which is this interpretation of who has the authority. The legislature is the lawmaking body. So then that brings up, okay, if the legislature does do something, what is the governor? Constitutionally, the governor's authority is to veto. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll see that. And but that goes back to my point, is that this should be about the citizens who are unemployed, who are facing the anxiety, who are in the hospitals and having to deal with this on the front line, and get I should add the businesses that are out of work, get the businesses back up and running, and solve the economics of this, or certainly lessen the impact instead of a prolonged fight. But based on my research, let me answer it this way. Constitutionally, it's my position, and I think everybody's position that's in this, is that it's the legislature's authority or ability to appropriate. And even if there is a law passed by the legislature that says this other entity can appropriate, that would be ruled unconstitutional. And we have those debates all the time. So, but in this case, there is a statute that was passed a while ago that arguably gives the governor the ability in an emergency situation to handle these factors. So the question is, so in one way, the legislature has given that authority away, and that's my point. Maybe we shouldn't do that in the first place, and those need to be looked at. So what is the legislation going to look like? If there is legislation, I'm not sure. It could be either address the statute, or it could come up with a new statute. But understand this: in the legislature, there's two procedures. There's the statute, the law, and the appropriation. So the money is already sitting in a bank account, and as part of the legislature's duty, we appropriate and send the money on a regular basis to where it needs to go out of those bank accounts.